So I guess we will get started. Welcome everyone to UHAB's Community Land Trust and Housing Co-ops. My name is Walter Blenman. I am the Director of Co-op Development for UHAB. For those of you who don't know, UHAB has been around for over 45 years in the co-op industry. We are not only a developer of co-ops, we provide training for the member HDFCs and residents. We do tenant organizing, help them with policy structures and getting them involved in the political process of getting policies in the city through. And we assist, well, we don't do the sales, but we provide the link for the sales. One of the things that UHAB has done was partner with 3 other organizations to do CLTs across the city, and they have established an organization called Interborough. Interborough is made up of UHAB, the Mutual Housing Authority of New York, the Center for New York City Neighborhoods, and Habitat for Humanity's New York. Interborough is looking to do a citywide, not looking to do, they are doing a citywide effort to get CLTs involved in co-ops that are being developed across the city to create a permanent affordability. This way, the developers can't come in and purchase the land and raise rents. This is going to be long-term, sustainable, and affordable. With that, I will pass the mic to my colleague, Ariel Hirsch, who will introduce our panelists for the evening.
Great. Thank you so much, Walter. I'm so excited to be here with all of you tonight. And yes, thank you, Walter, for providing some background on both UHAB and also the work that we've been doing internally with Community Land Trust in New York City. I think we're really excited about this event because we're going to be talking to and with some of our partners working in sort of the broader community land trust and co-op space across New York City, because we are in this as a movement of many different groups and community organizations and folks across the city working towards this. So I will start off with introducing our panelists. We will be hearing tonight from Elise Goldin at Nicely. Elise joined the New Economy Project staff in June 2021 and supports the organization's community land trust organizing and policy work, including coordination of the New York City Community Land Initiative, or Nicely. Elise comes to this work with a decade of experience organizing with groups including tenants, street vendors, and public school parents, and working as a UHAB organizer. Welcome back. In 2020, Elise graduated from CUNY School of Professional Studies with a master's degree in applied theater. She focused her research on bringing theater tools to organizing spaces to strengthen leadership development and political education skills and bolster creativity. We'll also be hearing from Albert Scott, the board president of the East New York Community Land Trust. Albert Scott Jr. is a lifelong East New York resident and activist dedicated to the economic empowerment of his community. He serves as the board chairman of the East New York Homeowners Association Incorporated and serves on the board of the Coalition for Community Advancement, Progress for Cypress Hills in East New York. We'll also be hearing from Charles at the Cooper Square Community Land Trust and Mutual Housing Association. Charles has lived in Lower Manhattan for more than 50 years. He raised his children there, and for his entire adult life has been active in community affairs, housing, and social justice issues. Charles has been a Cooper Square Community Land Trust representative to the Cooper Square Mutual Housing Association board from 2011 to 2019. He currently serves on the Cooper Square Community Land Trust board as vice chair. In addition, he sits on the board of the 2 buildings Tenants United and HDFC transferred from the city, HPD, to the Cooper Square Community Land Trust in 2019. Charles is a semi-retired lawyer, currently working as a pro bono attorney with the Safe Passage Project, representing undocumented and unaccompanied immigrant minors who are seeking asylum and/or special immigrant juvenile status. We've got a really, really great lineup for you tonight, and we're really excited to speak with all of them. We are going to start it off with presentations, about 5 to 10 minutes from each panelist, and then we'll come back to speak together as a group before we have some questions from the audience. So with that, I think I will turn it over to Elise.
Great, thank you. And yeah, really excited to be here with everybody this evening. All right, I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Let's see. Cool. Is that working? Ariel?
Looks great. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Great. So as was said, so I'm Elise. I am a CLT organizer, community land trust organizer with the New Economy Project. And just really briefly, New Economy Project is working to build an economy that works for all based on cooperation, equity, social, racial justice, ecological sustainability. So through kind of this lens, we are working to support the growth of community land trusts across New York City. And the way that we're doing that is supporting the coalition work of NICELY, the New York City Community Land Initiative. And this is a really amazing group of people that have come together. Community land trusts. Sorry, my cat was going crazy. Community land trusts, advocates, people that are working to promote community land trusts in New York City, really focused on the basic fact that housing is a human right and that communities who are most impacted by development should be the ones making decisions about that development. So I have here our core values as a coalition. Just to read a few, land, water, air, other natural resources should be stewarded and protected. Land is a common good, housing is a human right. That housing and development should be for people, not for profit. These are the values that guide us as a coalition and are influencing the way we view community land trusts. So quickly, so here's a graphic that we like to use. And so I'm going to invite folks to kind of look at the picture and put in the chat, what do you see happening on the left side of this picture? What's going on? And I'll read some out. So corporate greed, business as usual, right? So speculators, Wall Street, corporate landlords are, selling off land to the highest bidder. Housing is a source of profit, I see, gentrification, money bags, all market future. Exactly. So we see that as sort of the state of things now, right, in New York City and in our country in general. And then what do you all see on the right side of the picture? What's happening on the right side? Community, people working together, housing justice, nice place to live, exactly, affordable housing through CLTs. So that's sort of our vision, right, is the land being taken out of speculation, where people are coming together to make decisions over how they want land to be used, and for it to actually be beneficial and yeah, as a way that's going to be protecting the land for future generations as well. So Yeah, so just also a note that CLTs are really based in the racial justice movement. And the first CLT was started in 1969 in Albany, Georgia, by a group of Black farmers who had been evicted from the area for civil rights activity. And they came together to form a collective farm. So just putting that in context of like where CLTs really came from. Whoops. So what is a CLT? So a CLT is, in its most basic form, it's a nonprofit that is set up to acquire, hold, and develop land for the public good. And it really has two main components, which is permanent affordability and community governance. So the CLT holds the land, taking it out of speculation, putting it into really community control where a board is making decisions about the use of the land and is renting the land on top through a 99-year lease where it can put affordability terms, use restriction terms, whatever the community is deciding onto how that land is going to be used. And then is making sure that, you know, if the use is changing hands in some form, the CLT is always there to be sort of that community stakeholder to make sure that it's being stewarded in a way that is beneficial. And so the way that it's doing that is through what we think of as this tripartite board. So which is like the residents or the current users of the land. So maybe it's tenants, maybe it's homeowners, gardeners, whoever is currently using the land. That's one entity that's sitting on the board. Another entity is written here as other neighbors, but other community members, other neighbors, the larger community who, you know, has an interest in not just the exact parcel of land, but the broader community, and wanting to make sure that the CLT like remains an interest for the community. And then the third group are representatives of organizations, maybe technical assistance groups, people who are going to help like maintain the stability of the CLT. And what's pretty amazing is that like as of a few years ago, there was really only one, as far as I know, active community land trust in New York City, Cooper Square CLT, which is here tonight. And then because of the work of organizers, of Nicely, and the fight to really get some funding, which built our capacity, we were able to now be, we've really grown the movement. And now there are, as you can see, like tons of CLTs all across the city. I think there are about 15 now, like active CLTs, and then groups that are constantly reaching out to us for support in organizing new CLTs across the city. So it's really exciting to see that kind of boom. And so just kind of like a few examples, you know, we have East Harlem Albario CLT. There are probably people on this call that know much more about it, but you know, it was really started by Picture the Homeless, which is a group of organized people who are homeless, who are fighting for homeless rights and for housing for homeless in New York City. And they, with other groups, came together after fighting for a while and realizing how much sort of vacant land and vacant buildings there were in the city and how many obvious homeless people there are in the city, that something doesn't match up, and that maybe a CLT could be a tool for creating housing for homeless people. And so they created this pilot project eventually in East Harlem, which eventually turned into the East Harlem Albario CLT, which recently acquired 4 rental buildings that are going to be mutual housing, or are mutual housing, and they're working to really set up the board and create a functioning CLT structure. And then another example of a CLT that we're seeing is the Western Queens CLT, which formed really during and then after the fight against Amazon coming in and putting their headquarters in Queens, where, yeah, and kind of the slap in the face was not only coming in and taking up so much land, but being given city-owned land for this really profit-driven company. So after successfully kicking out Amazon, Western Queens CLT formed and is envisioning what they want to do with this land. And so they're talking about creating, food co-ops, shared commissaries for street vendors, schools, or putting a school in art and music studios. So all of these things, and this really shows the flexibility of the CLT model, that it can be used for housing in all different forms. It can be used for green space. It can be used as commercial space, but it's really about what the community wants. And I know, oh yeah, okay, last slide. Just that we really need policies to be able to get land and put land into CLTs. As everyone I'm sure can imagine, that's really the hardest fight in New York City, is acquiring land that's so, that the market has driven up and is just so, is worth way more than most people can afford, especially, community groups. And so we're working on strategies to get land in ways that are accessible. So through different policies like tenant opportunity to purchase, through the tax lien sale reform, through trying to change the city charter and get public land to be funneled into CLTs when being disposed of. So yeah, and I think I'll leave it there and I'll pass it on.
Great, thank you so much. I think, Albert, you're up next.
Thank you, Ariel, and thank you, Elise, for sharing that information as far as what a CLT is and how the movement is progressing. It is our hope, not even our hope, our mission, to make sure those numbers quadruple in New York City. Every block should have a CLT, in my opinion. With that being said, good evening, everyone. My name is Albert Scott. I'm with the East New York Community Land Trust. We're an organization of community leaders and activists dedicated to preserving affordability for future generations and providing a vehicle to create generational wealth. Our mission is to protect, stabilize, and expand the stock of affordable homes, locally owned small businesses, and green spaces in East New York and Brownsville for the benefit of low to moderate income of Black and Brown residents in our communities. And our vision, bold and focus. Our vision is for a healthy, self-sustaining community where our needs are provided for us, by us, and where we can build the generational wealth for the whole community. And I definitely just want to piggyback a little bit what Elise has mentioned in reference. I'm just so excited to be a part of this CLT movement. When I have conversation with peers and with other folks, it is that what if factor. What I know now, I wish I knew 10, 15 years ago, when there was a ton of public land within our community in East New York and Brownsville. The organizing efforts, the demands, I'm sure will be so much different as it is today. But all we can do from now is simply learn and move forward. And with the CLT movement, especially out here in East New York, in which we're joining with partners in the Bronx and Queens as well, is how do we get the existing public land for CLTs? Elise alluded to as far as we need more CLT legislative policies to be enacted in which land should be given to community land trusts, but we know nothing is ever given freely. You have to organize, organize, organize. And what we have done out here in East New York in reference to the public land is two things that I want everyone to pay close attention to. Is the release of our black paper, which will be released either by the end of October or early November. Everyone may always talk about the white paper, but out in East New York and Brownsville, we call it the black paper, basically identifying public lands in which we're targeting to get the public land. And one of that is definitely in reference to the NYPD underutilized vacant lots that we see here. In some cases, some of these lots are being utilized by NYPD. However, it's under different agencies in which we have a major housing issue. I think housing should take precedent over parking along those lines. So all of those sites and information will be detailed in the black paper, and that will be the main one of the many organizing tools in reference to the public land for CLTs. In addition to that, what has been also been on our radar, and it should be on the radar of a lot of communities, is that there's a ton of gardens in East New York. And we know that majority of them are presently either under a city agency. Our concern is what will happen if all of a sudden these become targets and want to be transferred over to for-profit developers. A CLT is a movement, but it is a tool. It is a tool not only to acquire land, but this tool is to address, is to get economic justice, housing justice, and simply public land justice. When we think of CLTs, yes, it deals, we're looking for deep, affordable housing, but this dynamic tool, if effectively utilized, could also address some of the economic injustices that's taking place in communities such as East New York and Brownsville. And what you're going to hear more of in the very near future is in regards to the fact of the marijuana justice, this new industry that seems to be, that will take place in New York State, in anticipation of a multi-billion-dollar industry. Industry that I want folks to remember, where our communities such as East New York and Brownsville, folks were sent to jail around this. Now this is being legalized. So it's only fitting that our communities be at the forefront at this industry so it can reinvest back into our communities. And what's the first step? You have to have land and community ownership to help to facilitate and make sure the resources are directed accordingly. And that's why I get so passionate and excited about this dynamic tool. Its full potential. We're just barely scratching the surface. But this tool mainly, the main component about it is the organizing. I don't care what anyone says, organizing works. CLTs in New York City was at the forefront in reference to the abolish the tax lien sale, a tool that was utilized, that was created by the Giuliani administration, which disproportionately impacts communities of color. During a pandemic, they wanted to initiate a tax lien sale. Let that resonate. During a pandemic, you was looking to push a tax lien sale to get folks out their home. And then when we looked at the top 5 folks with the that appeared on this tax lien sale, it was predominantly, if not all, communities of color. And through the organizing effort, which started in one community in actually became a citywide movement. And that's through effective organizing. And that's just one example of this CLT tool, if utilized. And to replace this existing system with something that will be much more better, and the CLT will be involved. Stay tuned for the outcome for that as well. So what I like to leave the audience is with this, just three things. Organizing works. The CLT movement is real. You heard Elise, the first presenter, state that it started off with 1 and now it's at 15. I want to see that number go up to 100, because that means that folks are organizing and housing is a #1 issue and concern. But we also know the economics behind it, as far as more cooperative businesses. This tool could help address and help facilitate that direction. Because a wise person once said, nothing is affordable without some sort of income coming in along those lines. So just to keep that in mind, and I'm just excited about this evening, about this CLT movement. And the only regret I have is I wish what I know now, I knew at least, if not 5 to 10 years ago, different outcomes out here in East New York. But we will continue to organize, and I'll transfer the mic back on to Ariel.
Great. Thank you so much, Al. So much there, and I cannot wait to get into it. I will pass it along to Charlie.
Hi. I thank you, Ariel, and thank you for including us on the panel. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I'll talk a little about the Cooper Square Community Land Trust. As I think Ariel stated, it was the first community land trust in the city. And now we are approaching our 30th year. And I would like to actually start off by talking about our history and to understand where we are today. Our history goes back, strangely enough, maybe 70 years ago. And around that time, there was a plan that was promulgated by Robert Moses called the Lower East Side Manhattan, the Lower Manhattan Expressway. And if that plan was implemented, that would mean the displacement of over 2,000 residents and 800 businesses. And what occurred was a community organizing an opposition to that plan. And out of that organizing, basically came the Cooper Square Mutual Housing Association and the Cooper Square Community Land Trust. The Cooper Square Community Land Trust and Mutual Housing Organization actually came into being in about 1993 when the city transferred the land and the over 328 units of housing in to the community. And as was stated, the Cooper Square Community Land Trust took possession of the land and gave a 99-year lease to the residents with the proviso that the units would remain affordable in perpetuity. And that's the whole function of the Community Land Trust, is to keep housing affordable. And what I'd like to actually talk about is the actual structure of the Community Land Trust, and with respect to the residents and the difficulties and actually positive things that have occurred. The units actually became co-op units about 9 years ago in 2012. And the board of the community of the Mutual Housing Association, which oversees the governance of the properties of the units, the board is comprised of 15 people. 10 people are shareholders, elected shareholders, and 5 people are the Community Land Trust members. And the Community Land Trust members are non-shareholders. The Community Land Trust itself is comprised of 9 members, 6 of which are non-shareholders and 3 shareholders. So they're interlocking boards. And the issues that have come up over the years have been trying to create an education as to what the Community Land Trust is, because people who are now, a lot of people who are residents or shareholders have no idea of the history of the struggle that the community went through for a long time, you know, starting in the 40s and the 50s and gone onto the 60s when the plan was finally defeated. The Robert Moses plan was defeated. So I think that that's really important. And we have been moderately successful in some areas, but unsuccessful in others. And we have to struggle to let people know that the Community Land Trust is dedicated to keeping the housing affordable. And the issues that we run across when we're on the board of the Mutual Housing Association is to balance the affordability and keeping the maintenance fees low with keeping the maintenance in reasonable, making sure that repairs are done. Because I think a lot of co-ops have failed around the country when the capital repairs have been neglected to allow maintenance to be as low as possible. So that's a struggle we are forever engaged in. Also, I think another struggle we're engaged in is to get the community residents to see that the Community Land Trust movement is something that is more than just the Cooper Square Mutual Housing Association and the Cooper Square Community Land Trust, that we have to make alliances, that we can exist as an island. And we are forever battling to keep make people aware that our struggle is an important part of a larger struggle. So I think that's what I'm going to end on now, that it's something that we have to keep in mind, that we can't just exist as one little community, that our community has to encompass a larger community, and maybe even, outside of New York, a nationwide community of community land trusts. Okay, I'm going to stop now.
Thank you so much, Charlie. That was really great to hear about. And thank you everyone for going through in-depth sort of to talk about your work and what you've currently been engaged in. I heard a lot of things about changing relationships, dynamics between people, land, and communities, thinking about how to build generational wealth, how to make it by us and for us, and those ongoing struggles of how to maintain the housing, maintain the affordability, maintain those relationships over time once you have those structures in place. So I think because our topic is supposed to be loosely focused on those interactions in between community land trusts and housing cooperatives, which I think includes HDFCs, which is, I think UHAB's bread and butter, but also we know a broad array of social housing, including mutual housing associations, which many CLTs use, as well as Llama co-ops, social housing, including public housing, and many other things that fit under that umbrella. I want to start by talking about these sort of structures, the structure of a CLT, the structure of a housing co-op, and go through some of the advantages and disadvantages. And I think, Charlie, maybe I'll turn it back over to you to talk a little bit more about the ways, that's sort of played out over the long history of Cooper Square, and then I'll open it back up to Albert and Elise.
So let me, Ariel, let me get your question again, that you want to know what the advantages and disadvantages are of having the Community Land Trust sit on the board of the Mutual Housing Association.
Yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah. How they interact with each other.
Well, it has been at times a really cooperative venture, I have to say, that we were that our goals seem to be focused together. And at other times, I think there's been a bit of conflict when people actually see the Community Land Trust as outsiders and not, having, as somebody said, having skin in the game. And I think that that's exactly the reason that the Community Land Trust actually sits on the board as somebody who is, as a body that is somewhat removed and can use its expertise to actually see what's best for the community. I have to say that the Community Land Trust is a co-signator of a regulatory agreement with HPD, which specifies that members of the Community Land Trust have to have a certain amount of expertise in housing, in community issues, in things that are related to economic issues in the community. So they just can't be anybody off the street, and our Community Land Trust is comprised, beside me, of people who have a long history of community activism. And I think that this is like a great thing, but also is seen with somewhat, sometimes some people on the board who are shareholders are somewhat suspicious and think that we're, like in it for, some reason other than to benefit the community, benefit the Mutual Housing Association, that we are, have a bigger agenda. And the truth is, we do have a bigger agenda, and our bigger agenda is to see the principles of Community Land Trust spread throughout the city and farther. So we're really struggling with how to come to terms with these contradictions. I don't know if I answered your question, but we can revisit this.
That's great. Yeah, I'm sure there is so much more, but I want to open it up also for Al and Elise to comment.
Oh yeah, definitely, Ariel. I would say out here in East New York, the advantages of the CLT, I see it as a great organizing tool, getting folks on board as it pertains to land justice issues out here in East New York. And when I say land justice issues, that's everything from the gardens, that's everything from renters to home owners. And that has been displayed in leading the way on certain key issues, especially the initiative to abolish the New York City tax lien sale, its current format, the way it is, addressing those issues. And then as we drill down even on a micro grassroots organizing level, during the height of the pandemic. I don't know about anyone else communities, but between sanitation and graffiti, that thing just went rampant throughout our community. But to see us organizing, having block cleanups and things of that nature, and people bonding that way, participating in the food distribution, and then at the end of the day, in the East New York CLT, the ongoing learning of its full usage, its full housing justice potential, its full economic potential. It's just so exciting for us. And I have to say, definitely being on one accord to address those issues. Because one thing during the pandemic, it slowed everyone down, and then everyone had time to think, and then even to participate, because how we came to fruition was during, as I tell everyone, that we was birthed through the fire during the pandemic. You try to take land during a pandemic, what kind of craziness is this? Sanitation issues, not being represented, not have representation in city council, all of those things were happening, but us playing that role in as a true, utilizing the CLT as an organizing tool to address land just issues. Some of the challenges, I won't even say disadvantage, I'll say some of the challenges. I think Charlie alluded to that, to something, is the fact that eventually, I wish we had, on a national level, there's like I wish there was a national federation of CLTs organized, so we can then get more access to the resources. Because as we are truly organizing and getting the people, and then they say, okay, here's the public land, but then you're going to have some resources to build and try to deliver on those extreme low income affordable rental opportunities. And a national federation of CLTs to access the federal level, because I think they'd be getting a pass because they print the money. I'm like, print more, I don't care. But just redirect the resources to communities such as East New York along those specific lines. So the disadvantage is definitely the access to those resources on the city and state level. Yeah, but what would it look like have a national federation of community land trusts in which we're targeting federal resources, entity that prints the money, you understand, and having those potential impact. So that's what I would say on that end. But the advantage is the opportunity to continue to grow the tent, increase the diverse income levels, the diverse personalities. Because I know within East New York CLT, it's such a diverse background that we have, and it's very exciting on that end. But the challenges, like I said, it's the resources. We're going to give you 900 acres of land. Now go build. You're like, okay, now we need the money. But like I always say, that's a good problem to have. We can always work a deal out. But those are some of the challenges. I wouldn't say disadvantages, because the CLT is a great tool.
Yeah, for sure. Elise?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer, or if you want to go to a next question, just because I think a lot has been said already.
Okay, sure. I think the next thing that I want to talk about, since I know that we have a number of HDFC shareholders, and I saw a wonderful question in the chat earlier from Flora about, struggling in her HDFC and thinking about what the possibilities are and what the potential benefits are of putting her housing co-op, her HDFC, onto a CLT. And I want to think about what it means to combine those two things in practice a little bit, as well as maybe what it means to combine other models for folks who maybe don't have direct housing co-op experience, to think about the combination of gardens and land trusts, or commercial space and land trusts, food justice, all of these things, sort of what we magnify when we add something to a CLT. And maybe we'll start with you, Elise, because we didn't get to you last question.
Sure, yeah, that is a really great question. I think that I'm not the housing development expert, but I do I know that is happening in the city, where groups like Interborough, for example, that was mentioned earlier, is looking at distressed HDFCs, and looking at how to kind of work with them to have the land under the HDFC and sort of, again, take that land out of speculation and kind of be managing it, while the HDFC still like owns their property. And I'm sure there's a lot of technical elements of that I don't fully understand, but I think that there are ways to sort of support the finances of the HDFC. I will also say that one kind of what Ariel was saying that I think is really awesome about kind of the combination of CLTs and HDFC co-ops would be, the sort of like kind of broader vision of what you want for the land. So I think, a HDFC co-op is run and structured by the residents, really like internal facing. And I think bringing that CLT element brings sort of the larger community element. So, community members would be sitting on the board with the vision of, how is this land stewarded not only for the current residents, but future generations and the broader community. So yeah, those are some things that come to mind.
Can I add one thing that I would like to just put into the mix? What was kind of tangentially mentioned in the introduction is that the Square Community Land Trust took over the land under two buildings that there was a $30 million tax lien on, called the two buildings Tenants United. And for 2 years, we've had a part-time employee who has organized the tenants and through an enterprise grant and the city council money. But the money is just so difficult, especially the city council money, as we all know, that the funding has been such a problem with this HDFC that we have actually we're in the process of losing our one organizer. And I think that this is when the CLT takes over buildings or takes over land, I think the funding is a very important issue that we have to address, because administering these properties is quite a big deal, and we don't realize it until it comes into our lap. And now we're faced with it, with these two buildings not having a funding stream and having to deal with renovations and other issues. So I just want to raise that, and it's been difficult.
Yeah, and I definitely want to add on to that. That's why I touch base as far as the importance of the resources and the federal, like for example, with this Build Back Better agenda, there was actually monies for community land trusts in there nationwide, but it seems to would be a start. But now there seems to be folks want to negotiate the housing resources out of that. And mind you, housing is like the #1 issue in regards across the US. I get that portion of it, but that just goes back to that national network. And I'm glad Andrew wrote in the chat in reference that there is a national network, but the networks have to be activated. And literally, how can we channel that energy to the speaker or something like that, stating, hey, put back those monies for community land trusts on that agenda portion, hence the HDFC and things of that nature. It is so important, because I think folks that I speak with and have conversation with, they said the city and state CLT seems to be very engaged with, whether it's on a daily, monthly basis, trying to address certain key issues. But that federal representative or that federal aspect of it seems to be getting a pass. And now there's a key opportunity where there's literally some resources, especially for CLT spelled out. I believe it's, is it 100 million or so? I don't know, but it's some significant amount in which they're looking to now negotiate out of the Build It Back Better agenda. So just to keep those things in mind, and it's important for us to hit all levels of government, because at the end of the day, reinvest taxpayers' money. It's more of us than them, Ariel?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Al. And I think I want to get to a question about resources and policies, and I want to get into the weeds on that one. But before we do that, I think the next thing that's come up as a thread throughout a lot of the conversations we've been having is about keeping up community involvement, getting folks involved for the first time, and then stewarding that involvement, keeping folks participating, and the importance of that sort of constant struggle, that constant organization. And so I want to ask each of you a little bit personally, maybe to your own organizations and the work that you do, how you increase that community involvement, how you get folks involved, or how you keep them engaged. Especially, we know these are fights where we lose a lot before we win, as Al, I think you were alluding to, and we have to keep fighting through all of those junctures. And I want to hear from you all a little bit about that.
I'll chime in on. I'll chime in on that one. Like I say, East New York Community Land Trust, made up of some strong leaders and activists from A to Z. And the simple model that we have is think, plan, act. And then the second is fighting back and fighting forward. What we realize is, as we think about something and we plan it, that none of that means anything if you do not act at setting some key timeline. And I know within East New York, what they, at the end of the day, humans are synthetic. They got to see it, they got to hear it. So they see that constant engagement, whether it's on social media or we're literally having in-person type meetings, of course, even during a pandemic, things of that nature. And people see that we're actually literally on the corner doing surveys, asking community, what is your vision for this particular vacant public land? And folks actually appreciate that there's someone that's asking about that. And then when we ask that question, normally the normal human response is, yeah, but how are you going to get it? What can we do to get it? We don't own it. There's nothing we could do. But hold on. And then hence the introduction of the CLT. And we, like I said, we have from Deborah Agniani. I don't want to get in trouble by naming all of the names, but literally all hands are on deck in that particular aspect. But from the land surveys to the block cleanups to actually putting out op-eds in regards to marijuana justice and things of that nature, it seems to catch on within our community. But the concept within East New York CLT, think, plan, act. And when you act, you go hard, because you can't think things to death, and you can't say we want to plan it and wait for the right situation, the right opportunity, because that does not exist. But after the thinking, the planning, just do it. And then people get like that sense of urgency and energy that's pushed forward. And that has been successful for East New York Community Land Trust. It's just getting out there. But the public land surveys, face to face, asking folks, what do you want to see? Because normally folks will wake up and see a building. I did not know this was happening. You understand? But now there's a pause, and then that's how we was able to even grow out our steering committee due to that activity, and the constant education through the workshops that we have to continuously to educate folks about a CLT, what it is, how it could be utilized to address not only housing but economic justice as well. And with housing, it's three fronts: in East New York: NYCHA, rental, and ownership. And all three have challenges. And then for the economic piece, you're going to start hearing something about Section 3 justice, in which it's a federal policy or rule that any type of fixtures or any type of investment within NYCHA, the surrounding community should have access to opportunities there. And what we're hearing for some residents is that's not happening. So now we're seeing Section 3 is not being economic friendly in our community. So it's just keeping your pulse on that and understanding the audience. And East New York CLT does a great job.
For sure. Elise, do you want to jump in?
Sure, I can. I mean, I think less from my experience at Nicely, just because I'm newer, but I think as an organizer, that's the age-old problem, right? Of how to keep people engaged once maybe you've addressed their immediate concerns, or, you know, through years of a campaign that, you know, how do you help people not be just grow so frustrated that they never want to participate again. And I think, you know, I see Ryan put in the chat, right? How do you connect like the actual lived experiences to larger issues that are happening in your community? I think the way to do that, which is always really hard, right, is like through political education, through connecting what's happening in your building or your apartment to larger issues of housing as commodity, of capitalism, of, you know, workers' justice. Like, how are all of these things connected, and then engaging people in the, you know, through solidarity, or like seeing how you taking action beyond your apartment or beyond your building is still like creating a world that we want to live in. So that's, but I think it's so hard. And I think also just creating community, right? The reason that people generally participate in any organizing is because they want to show up and hang out with the other people there, maybe like catch up, or, you know, just be in community, feel supported, be able to support others, laugh and enjoy each other's company. And so I think that's the other way that I've seen really successful organizing, is just when spaces are fun and enjoyable or supportive, and creating that community feel that like actually attracts people to it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Elise. And I want to turn it over to Charlie with, I think, indulge my specific bent towards keeping involvement over time and keeping folks engaged through sort of like the long arc. Charlie, you're still muted.
Sorry. I guess I have to say that we're still trying to figure it out. It's a struggle that we have been engaged in as long as I have been involved with the Community Land Trust, which is now probably going on 11 years. And I don't have the answer, but you know, some of the things that we've tried is we have created a pamphlet explaining what the Community Land Trust is. We've participated in, you know, town hall meetings. We are a little we have constrained in, actually the Community Land Trust people are constrained in going out into the community itself to organize, because we are sitting on the board of the Mutual Housing Association, and we're seen as, you know, co-governors and monitors, and we have to maintain a kind of a certain distance in that way. So there are contradictions that are difficult. We did have the TBTU, or Two Buildings Tenants United. We had a wonderful organizer who is, I think, still on staff for a little while, and I think he's in in the among the participants. But the issues that we have run up against, especially during COVID, is the distance that COVID has created, and that we have to have Zoom meetings, and some of the tenants don't have access to computers and Zoom, and we are the Community Land Trust is constantly addressing the issues of how we can overcome the lack of involvement of the community in the Community Land Trust, and the actually what remains a certain lack of understanding of what the Community Land Trust is among the community, a large segments of the community. So this is something we are struggling with, and wish, if other community land trusts have been more successful, we will definitely adopt their models. But I have to admit that it's been difficult over the years.
Yeah, I absolutely hear that. And I also want to pick up on those, what you said, Charlie, because I think that that will sound really familiar to a lot of folks who are joining us from any HDFC, any co-op, that it's hard to get folks to participate over sort of the long arc, and that sort of difficulty and struggle to keep folks engaged, especially when there are barriers of language, when there are barriers of technology access. We all have Zoom fatigue. It's hard. And that process is like a constant one, and that we are also, trying to figure it out. But I appreciate your forthrightness and your honesty in that specifically. To pivot a little bit, and I think speaking of Zoom fatigue, I have one more question that I want to ask you guys, but I think I want to ask it quickly, like a super rapid fire, so we can get to some folks' questions, because I've seen wonderful questions in the chat. So what I've heard overwhelmingly from all of you tonight is how much so many of our struggles are interlinked. I hear about marijuana justice. I hear about the rights of street vendors, thinking about combating Amazon and public giveaways of public land, thinking about fights against New York City, the NYPD's parking and warehousing of lots, thinking so much about this transformative change and community land trusts and housing co-ops as one sort of piece in this broader struggle. So I'd love to hear from each of you quickly about one policy that you're really excited about that would be significant for the work that you do with community land trusts.
I'll start off. One, definitely, we definitely working with nicely is definitely the public land for CLTs, and one is the policy, the public land disposition bill. This bill will simply prioritize community land trusts for all public land in New York City, if passed, rather than prioritizing the for-profit developers, but prioritizing community land trusts, giving us that option to get the public land. And in partnership with Nicely and other community land trusts, hopefully this could get on a ballot in the very near future. So stay tuned, New York City. But I don't want to give all of it all away, or give too much of it away. I want to leave some for Elise to share as well.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, so I just put in the chat, just to correspond with that, a link to take action and let our current target, the Racial Justice Commission, who are currently who are working to address sort of racial or racism in the New York City Charter, and thinking about ways to amend the charter to address that and bring about more racial justice. And so we're asking the Racial Justice Commission to propose a an amendment to the charter, which would prioritize public land when it's being disposed of to go into CLTs and nonprofits. So yeah, I mean, I can talk about other policies. I know we don't have too much time. I'll just put out there tenant opportunity to purchase, community opportunity to purchase, which would give tenants or nonprofits first right of refusal when buildings go up for sale. So we're working on that.
Thanks so much, Elise. And I will highlight that I am also really excited about the tenant opportunity to purchase legislation because I have folks who reach out to me all the time and say, we are an organized TA and we would love to become a co-op. We would love to be on a CLT, but we don't have the resources to do it. And that would add so much power. Okay, Charlie, any policies or policy challenges you've come up against that you'd like to highlight quickly?
Well, I would just go back to what would really excite me would be a funding stream that would allow CLTs to operate, with some amount of less than a day-to-day kind of vision, but a larger long-term vision. And right now, that's not there. That's not. We are still waiting for our 2021 funds from the city council, and and it's almost 2021 is almost finished. So some organizations that have big budgets, that's not such a big deal. But for us, we don't have a big budget. We don't have a lot of outside money, and so. What I would really like is some recognition that CLTs really do need an operating budget, and I would like to see more of that happen.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. I want to turn it over. I know we're getting late and we'll wrap it up soon, but I really do want to get to some of the wonderful questions that folks have been asking in the chat throughout the night. I don't have time to highlight them all, and I'm so sorry about that. I want to talk to you guys for hours about this because it's so interesting and exciting. But I'll start with a couple questions that have come from folks in the chat. A couple are about definitions, about defining affordable and what it means to be affordable. And I'd love to hear folks' thoughts on that.
I'll chime in on that one. I know out here in East New York, what we call affordable is our local median income. I wish if they would tie that to a LMI, local median income, because in community, I know in East New York, the average median income is around 35,000, whereas the average median income for this quote unquote affordable, in which the city uses based on that federal guideline, is between 86 or 90 or something like thousand on that end. So when we trying to push for quote unquote affordable, when we say affordable, we're talking about the local median incomes, because what we realize is we see this of what the city pushes out is just a silent way of, not even silent anymore, it's just a gentrification. You're looking just to simply displace the folks, because 9 times out of 10, the majority of these housing rental units don't have enough of the local median income. And if they do have some, it's probably 2 or 3. And then the rest is quote unquote the city version of it. But that's what we identify as deeply affordable on that end. And I'm trying to find a new verbiage for it or something like that, because when folks say affordable, affordable, but the best way I could say is our local median income. That's what we believe is truly affordable out here in East New York.
Yeah, and I'll just add, just on a very non-technical level, a lot of Nicely's work has been really spearheaded by Picture the Homeless and people who have experienced homelessness. And so our sort of vision of affordability is to really include, you know, people who are currently homeless, and that is likely, you know, extreme low income, but that's a priority of Nicely.
Great. Okay, I'm gonna move on to another question that folks asked about prioritizing local residents. And I think this also gets into a question of how we define community and what community means to each community land trust. And so I wonder if folks can speak on that a little bit.
I'm sorry, Ariel, can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question in the chat was, how do you prioritize local residents? And I think this question also has something to do with how to define community, the community piece of a community land trust or a co-op. Charlie, do you want to start? Or maybe Al, if you... Charlie, you're muted, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, you know, community is so important, but if it's too narrow, it becomes kind of like a very sort of constraining issue. You know, people just see what's important is just to aid the community itself. And I think that that's something that we are also kind of coming up against, is that community has to be narrowly defined, but also broadly defined at the same time, that we can't just be interested in what benefits our local community, that we have to be also aware that we are part of a larger community, and we can't exist as an island, especially in Manhattan, where rents are just crazy, you know, and our resident, you know, our shareholders are, they have to be aware that the developers are circling like vultures, and they can't just think that by existing as an island in this sea of developers and, you know, all these things that they can go on forever. So that, you know, that the fight is bigger than just us. You know, it has to encompass a larger community. But then again, it's really important that people develop strong bonds within the smaller community. So both are important.
Yeah, and I definitely see where Charlie's coming from, but I know through the lens of the East New York Community Land Trust, hyper local and hyper focused as far as it comes to prioritizing our community, because one of our members had mentioned actually in an article, like, if we get priced out of East New York, where are we going? Because Manhattan is much more expensive than it is even out here in East New York. So what we look to do, like I mentioned earlier, is peg it to the local median income. But then the challenges is, once we get the public land, let's say for the dollar, now the key is the financing for it, the resources. You constantly hear that theme. And how do you make it so that way you build a project and you satisfy, you have the resources, but you need to target this specific income levels, which you know will have a great effect for our community, whether it's through rental units or ownership component of that. But that is the hyper priority, is like, if we get the public land, the ultimate goal is to build it out where that local median income is the focus, is the target. Because Brownsville and East New York, we're like the last of the Mohegans. We're fully aware of what happened in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And I know a lot of folks that left Bed-Stuy and actually came and is actually moved, some moved to Brownsville and some moved to East New York. And when having conversations with them, they stated, man, the amount I was paying for rent in Bed-Stuy, I realized I can get a house out here in East New York. So you see how the economic pressures that starts to build. So that's why I was saying hyper targeting in regards to the local median income, see how we can finesse the resources and the packaging to help meet those needs. Easier said than done, I know folks would say, but it have to start there, and it has to be a strong fight for that, because after that, where are folks going to go? People are, because when they stated that they're looking to cut out the housing of the Build Back Better agenda, but they're looking to keep the infrastructure in place. Some folks are actually saying, oh, they want us to live under the new bridges that they're building. That's what folks are actually thinking, because the housing situation is so dire. So these are the things that are happening. So my thing is prioritization, that local median income for East New York and Brownsville to have that magnifying effect.
Great. Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one more question. And I think we've gotten a few different types of questions in the chat. And I apologize to the folks who asked their unique and special questions that I'm going to sort of ineloquently combine. But among a number of folks who are talking about either joining a community land trust in their neighborhood, finding out what organizing is going on where they are. And we have an audience who is not just in New York City. So thanks for non-New York City folks for hanging in with us through all of our very local talk. And then also folks who are interested in maybe starting a community land trust for the first time, thinking about what resources, what kind of folks you need to put together to get started. And I wonder if you all could share a little wisdom or any good resources to offer folks.
Elise, I'll let you touch base on that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think the first thing that we tell people who are interested and excited about forming a CLT is that, you know, it's about organizing and about building a base and creating, so you can't, I saw a question in the chat about, can one person form a CLT? I think that we would say, no, it's about a community coming together. And so organizing really needs to be at the forefront. And then beyond that, making sure that people are educated, understand kind of, you know, that a CLT is one tool to maybe achieve what you're looking for. And so kind of helping people explore various options. And I will also just say that nicely, the New York City Land Initiative is a resource. We get probably like 3 to 5 groups reach out to us. I want to say a week, maybe a month, whatever. We're always getting people reaching out to us to learn more about what are community land trusts, how can we form it, and we offer sort of CLT 101 presentations to groups that are interested, and that could be here in New York City, or it could be outside of New York City if it makes sense as well. So I will just put the link to our website in the chat. And if you're interested in learning more about forming a CLT and maybe having a presentation come to you in your community, please reach out.
And Ariel, I would also add on to Elise's the profound question individuals and groups should ask themselves: what is your vision for your CLT? And this vision should be so big and grand that it scares you. And if it scares you, that means it will motivate you and give you that extra drive. And when you have that big vision, when it will help energize and facilitate your organizing efforts around the CLT along that. Because when it's big, you're thinking about the population, you're thinking about the income dynamics, you're thinking about the vacant public lands, how many gardens, these things in which a CLT tool could help to preserve or to create or to protect. And that will bring in a wide range of various audience to your CLT. And I will put in a plug for if you want to partner up, whether you in New York City, if you're on the East Coast, either on the East, North, West Coast, there in the Caribbean islands, you can go to our eastnewyorkclt.org. We definitely love to connect because what we're trying to do, it's going to take organizing, group effort, and partnerships throughout the U.S. Because housing is the #1 issue for all of us, and it's all about the land.
I'm just going to add one other thing that I forgot to say, which is that how important it is to also make sure you have sort of technical assistance, because at least in New York City, you know, you have to be incorporated and you have to like be an actual nonprofit entity in order to acquire land. So a CLT is all great in theory, but if you want to actually be taking on the land, you need to sort of incorporate and often need that legal support.
Great, thanks. Charlie, any last pearls of wisdom?
Well, I think if anybody is really interested in CLTs, they probably should get in touch with Nicely. I think Nicely is a good resource. We occasionally are looking for people to serve on our boards, but if people are interested, maybe they can contact me at Charles Wertheimer at gmail.com. And if they have experience and are interested, maybe, you know, they can be involved in our CLT.
Absolutely. And I also want to plug, I think folks have shared this in the chat earlier in our discussion, the Grounded Solutions Network, which is also a national network of community land trusts across the country, as well as the Center for Community Land Trust Innovation, which is worldwide, but I think mostly focusing on Europe, and a shout out to their World CLT Day, which I think is happening this Friday. We had a poster up in our intro. I think this is the time to wrap it up. Thank you all so much for sticking with us. And thank you especially to our panelists, to Al, to Elise, to Charlie, and for all of your wisdom and contributions to our talk tonight. Thank you also to our attendees for joining us. And I do want to say that, you know, UHAB is a nonprofit and that we are attempting to do more work like this to reach out to groups and to make that public. And that if folks would like to go to our website and donate, donations do help us continue to have conversations like these and support the work that we do with community land trusts and mostly housing co-ops, HDFCs in the city. We will also wanted to let you know that this session has been recorded and we will be sharing out that recording in a couple of days, hopefully also with a couple helpful links. I know some folks shared some contact information, so you should be getting an email from us shortly within the next couple of days about that. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. This was so lovely and great to have you all here.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to say that in the chat, Ryan has posted the Cooper Square CLT email address. So if people want to respond to that. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.